name's Jessica Rose, and even though the accent doesn't really put me there, I've come up from Birmingham, which is where I'm based, and it's amazing. And I'm super, super into the people side of tech. I really, really love humans and human relationships and how that influences what we do in technology. I haven't been out to Bristol before. Has anybody heard me speak before?
Nope.
Yes. Before I got into technology, I was a teacher. So there's going to be sort of a cringe-worthy level of social interaction and repeat after me sort of things. At some points, you'll be asked to raise your hands or shout something, or at one point, Google stuff. Everybody just look gently uncomfortable if you're okay with that. Hey, everything's fine. So I actually started a brand new job, and I'm working with Dream Factory right now, sort of doing developer relations for a cool open source platform that magically makes REST APIs. And I was out talking to the team, like I flew out and was talking to the team based in the States, and one of my coworkers started telling me about Bigfoot. And he was explaining that the Bigfoot segment of the cryptozoology community was really, really dedicated. All right, that's cool. And that they had several huge ideological splits. That the Bigfoot camp was divided very, very strongly between the kill and no-kill camps of Bigfoot enthusiasts. Folks that thought, you know, when, never if, when we catch Bigfoot, we're going to kill him and stuff him and bring him in. And the folks that thought, well, when we catch Bigfoot, we're going to take pictures and samples and let him roam the woods. And I thought that was great because the challenges I saw in both of these plans never really touched these communities. Nobody had stopped to be like, well, Bigfoot, no, we'll totally catch them. And I was thinking about this. So I'm super into the way communities work. But I don't think that this issue is ever going to come up. I don't think that there's going to be Bigfoot enthusiasts standing over him and being like, no, wait. Let him go. But backing off a little bit more, I thought, like, hey, this feels quite a bit like conflicts within the open source communities I've seen, and conflicts within communities overall. We get really, really dedicated in problems, and we get really, really invested in conflicts that from the outside look completely bananas. Just really fast, the other big split in the Bigfoot community is the idea that Bigfoot is a supernatural being, and that's the reason he's never been captured, that he just sort of magically spaceships away, and the much, much more commonly held belief that he's a North American great ape. And I started thinking about, I really want to give a talk talking about the cryptozoology community and how it links up to community patterns in open source. And that seemed like a little bit of a stretch. I didn't think I was going to find anybody who was just like, yeah, I identify strongly with Bigfoot enthusiasts. Is anybody here really into cryptozoology? Look gently uncomfortable if you're into cryptozoology.
Use tennis.
So I decided to take a step back and think, like, you know what? I think in general that technologists, do we feel that some of us are closely aligned to sort of geeky communities and fandoms? Can I get a... So I decided to take a look at how fandoms and how the problems in their communities, how the patterns and how the processes might mirror a lot of the issues and sort of the procedures in open source communities. We've got really extreme dedication to very, very polarized viewpoints. Is anybody here involved in open source? Right. Y'all never argue, do you? And in fandoms, who here's Doctor Who fan? Cool. On the count of 3, could anybody please yell who the best Doctor is? 1, 2, 3. Wow, Britishes. Come on. Best Doctor? Oh,
Right.
Kind of, but I can't name them.
Oh, yeah.
That doctor, and there's another doctor, and they're all the doctors.
Can I get a general for this? This dude with the... That guy's terrifying. Best Doctor? This guy. Ugh. Lots of these guys
Yeah.
are creepy. So, is this guy actually a doctor?
Chris Eccleston, yeah.
He's alright.
That man is terrifying. I know this guy. This guy, best doctor. Scary, sweary, British, Scottish politician dude.
Yeah.
Alright. So, terrifying Birdman. These guys. So far we're thinking corduroy coat guy is the best doctor. Are there any big ideological splits in the open source communities y'all, not you guys, that you all have encountered? Can anybody name like a big split in either technologist or open source communities? Just yell at me.
JavaScript versus IOJS.
The whole PHP.
Oh, no, sorry.
The whole PHP thing.
The whole PHP.
You're like
All
the
of
thing
it,
that PHP existing. Anything else? Like, what are big ideological, just like, no issues in open source communities?
GPL versus MIT.
Tabs.
Merger, is it?
Tabs versus space. That should not be a conflict. It's tabs. There's.
What? Space?
Whoa. Okay, apparently this is a conflict that I am not encountered.
Get out.
It's still new tabs though. So I was going to make a point about like, you know what? We're really, really into these conflicts that don't really matter for us as individuals working in communities. If I really, really like Doctor Who, it shouldn't matter if other people think creepy corduroy dude is the best. I've seen like 2 of them and they were the lost episodes and they were terrible. It's just a bunch of black and white pictures of people in bee suits. Like, people working in PHP or tabs versus spaces shouldn't matter. It doesn't impact the way individuals, it doesn't impact the way you work. But we care so much because spaces are wrong. Fandoms and open source communities have the potential to get really, really locked into individual personalities. People love people. We tend to make connections with people over a project. And it gets difficult. This guy?
Hero.
Hero. I don't want anybody to show up with pitchforks, so he seems like a lovely fellow. So Torvi is a massive, massive personality that exists within the... He looks like a Torvi. A little bit snuggly. We get these projects and the personalities that really act both as figureheads and sort of missions within the project. So does anybody really, really well connected to the Linux community? Do you feel that you sort of identify with this person as...
He's a very different person to me, but I have great respect for his consistency.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I don't
He
have...
doesn't deal with people the way I would deal with people, but he's consistent.
Oh, cool.
That's true.
Yeah, so you tend to see people driving projects and these personalities that people have the opportunity to engage with emotionally. Does anybody know this lady? I have... Yeah, go on. Oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, sorry. I forgot that sort of folks are a little bit hesitant. Like, I should have poured more beer into y'all before making me answer questions. Felicia Day started out way, way back in the day. Doing a really long-running web series about massive multiplayer online game, and turned into sort of a little bit of a somewhat of a niche geek icon in her own right. And the thing I'm really, really interested in personality-driven communities is that when you have a personality-driven community, you get the community being driven by the personality. So Torvald being in charge of Linux as a personality, as a driving force behind the way the community forms and handles issues and deals with outsiders and deals with community members, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think has a lot to do, it informs quite a bit of how the Linux community is shaped. And when you look at sort of Felicia Day's fan base, the way that she approaches challenges and conflicts and situations really, really shapes the way that subsegment of gaming is shaped and interacts with the larger communities. So rules and standards. In technology, I know, lots of people think lots of things about codes of conduct. I'm not going to tell you that codes of conduct are good or bad, but one of the biggest arguments I hear around code of conducts is that why should we have them in technology? We don't have codes of conduct anywhere else in our lives, anywhere else in communities. Codes of conduct just don't exist. And every single little tiny, I'm not going to say insane, but fiercely dedicated subsegment of fandom has 10, 12, 20 competing codes of conduct and community guidelines. I chose the SHERLOCK one because it was the fluffiest. I don't necessarily recommend looking up any of the shared community standards for the brony community. They get super specific and would not have been appropriate for this talk. Almost every self-identified fandom has several competing community guidelines. I thought this was a really, really unique parallel. That as fractured, largely internet-based, largely online communities forming themselves, that they created these really, really intense guidelines of what they expected to see in community. So for in-group, out-group hostilities, I thought this would be a great one to talk about at a PHP event, because PHP. Looking at, I cut this off for a lot of reasons. When you look at people in fandom communities that have conflicts with other fandom communities, they are bonkers. These people care so deeply about the brony community caring about Steven Universe that it's confusing and upsetting to me as an outsider.
What's Steven?
It's quite a cute cartoon. So, for those who can't see, be as toxic as possible to any and all gentlemen. Insult them, call them out for being the neckbeards that they are. I know. If you see any of the adult content they make, send them hate. Yeah. So these are two largely marketed to children cartoon franchises where the adult enthusiasts of them are going to war in fandom factions. And this is incredibly interesting if you want to believe less in the kindness of human beings, but have a very interesting afternoon. So fandoms, massive splits, super, super polarized around cartoon horses or little cute fantasy children. So really quickly, can everybody pull out your phones or devices and Google for the last technology you've used plus sucks. Either Google or Twitter search, and yell them out so long as they're not horrible. PHP sucks is especially damning. Like, the return counts for that are high and depressing and kind of unfair.
I think we all know that one.
It seems unnecessary.
This is PHP, a fractal of bad design.
Aww.
I googled for Git sucks. There is actually something called 10 things I hate about Git. I thought nobody hated Git. I thought this was the best thing ever.
Oh, that's the best thing about communities, is no matter what community is, someone hates you.
Well, this one's pretty gentle. AngularJS kind of sucks.
Ember.js sucks, but sucks less than AngularJS.
It's a nice off, eh?
JavaScript was not made for servers.
True.
So yes, every single community, and I deliberately looked for technologies instead of open source communities, because those get kind of spiky,
Sorry. Yeah, we can't read that one out. That one's naughty.
What technology is it about?
Drupal.
Drupal.
Oh.
Although it is the third option.
Yeah,
It's the best one.
Oh.
Poor Drupal. Poor Drupal.
I searched Rails sucks, and the first result is why I hate Rails, and the second and third results are why PHP sucks.
It's hilarious.
We've even got better market penetration in the room.
The whole PHP sucks idea, people have just really run with that in a way that's not especially kind. If y'all can like get together with like either the Steven Universe community or the Brony, I think you could probably get the mass to take that back. The thing that felt the most like an actual match was the idea of how individuals within both of these communities worked. That you tended to have in fandom communities a relatively small core group of intensely dedicated, slightly terrifying fans. If you search for terrifying Twilight fandom, this is the least scary picture you get. There's also a woman holding a baby with a sort of temporary tattoo tramp stamp, which was amazing, but sort of not okay. People who are intensely dedicated to their fandom community or intensely dedicated to their open source community tend to get a little bit overwrought in ways that are difficult to access for relative outsiders. So having the intensely dedicated core community members buffered by a more casual, more lighthearted group really lets both community members, both community parents onboard people. You've got the chance to say, hey, I care about this project, or I care about this children's cartoon. I'm going to leave, I'm not going to pay that much attention to the really, really hardcore people, but as I come into the community, I'm really able to see ways I can participate, signposted by casual members. And once I get a little bit into it, maybe I really care about identifying with those very, very hardcore fans. Or maybe I'm going to go ahead and continue to identify with a big personality driving the community. And one of the other things I thought was really cool was fandoms are fracture prone. And I was really, really glad I was chatting right after somebody talking about Git. Fandoms care so much about source material in a way that's gently upsetting to me. Sherlock fans care a lot about elementary fans. If you get a chance, this is does anybody watch, like, really care about Sherlock?
My wife.
Does she really care about elementary?
I don't know what it is.
Do you go home and start an argument?
Oh, is that the American one with Johnny Lee Miller in?
It's that
Yeah.
guy with the
Yeah.
weird face.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Lucy
is
did.
that-
No, she doesn't like that. That's the bad one. She likes the Sherlock one with the Benedict pointy-faced man.
I'm glad I'm not the only person flubbing up pop culture stuff. You'd be like, no, that guy who looks like a weasel.
Yeah, that dude. Nailed it.
Can we not put this on the internet? Because this is going to go real bad for me. I think I'm sort of gently smack talking
His
a lot
fans
of...
will kill you. They are nuts.
He's a really cute weasel dude. But no, you saw a lot of people really dedicated to the source material who had somehow rejected the Sherlock version. Go ahead and get really, really intense into an elementary version of the source material and go completely intensely overboard with it. And I really, really love culture wars that make no sense to me. If you're not invested in it, it seems so pointless and beautiful. So if you want to watch elementary fans scrap with Sherlock fans via animated GIFs, there's no emoji for just a fork. I loved this idea that you could get fractured fandom communities coming off the source material and even different micro-fan communities. I looked quite a bit at sort of the furry subculture for this as well, but didn't include it because lots of people are not nice to them and lots of their material is not appropriate. They fracture into repeated iterations of different kinds of sub-communities that feels very much like a long-running open source community. I love that both fandoms and that both fandoms and technologist communities and open source communities had both online spaces where you would get people congregating, you would get people further reinforcing each other's identity through building what they thought this fandom meant. If you're not a part of the fandom, and I am not a part of these fandoms, they're really interesting, but difficult for me to access emotionally. It's really, really easy to discount the emotional value that they bring. So say, do you know what, the Steven Universe fans who were really, really into keeping the bronies out, they have a really, really strong emotional payout from being a part of this community. I thought this was really interesting. They come into these digital spaces and self-police, they look to set community standards, and they come into physical spaces as well. You get a completely amazing, gently bonkers cross-section of a number of fandoms around real-world events where you get people coming into a space and agreeing in more detail. This is who we are. This is what we care about as a fandom community. And let's go have some beers. And I think in technology and in open source communities, we've got a really, really good chance to look at the way we replicate that. So we come together online. We come together around the actual code, around committing, around accepting pull requests, around giving useful feedback for community projects. But then in spaces like this, which is really, really valuable. Why am I telling you about this? Except for the fact that I really wanted to show a bunch of pictures of gently mental fandom stuff. I think it's often hard to see the flaws in what we love. If you're really, really enmeshed within a community, if you've taken a lot emotionally from it and given a lot emotionally to it, it's hard to be honest and critical with yourself. So if you've been with an open source community for some time, and if you've worked with it for some time, it's really, really difficult to take criticism or to build your own criticism yourself. I think by looking at communities that follow a lot of the same patterns and draw from a lot of the same processes, it's really, really easy to see how some of those conflicts might seem unreasonable. So by saying, do you know what, the Steven Universe versus Bronies conflict, what? It's quite easy to say, do you know what, the whole tabs versus spaces thing, maybe it doesn't matter. And it's interesting, and it's weird, and it's cool. I think that the way we create open source communities, and the reason we value them so strongly, is that they mirror our natural need to create human networks. Humans, I think, by nature, as much as we're naturally inclined to anything, we're inclined to seek out relationships with other humans. We're made to seek out building things we value with other humans, and to hold and value the relationships we create through building. And by looking at things in other communities, ones that feel alien and ones that have a higher level of contrast, where we're better able to say, wow, that's bonkers, or, oh, that's kind of weird, but sweet, we're able to better carry those lessons into our own communities. So when you see conflicts that you have no emotional connection to, I hope it makes it easier to more critically value the arguments for conflicts we really, really invest in. And these folks are already in really established communities that match the patterns of our own open source communities. I think we can maybe poach some of these folks. Like the really, really angry Steven Universe fans, they seem to do a lot of typing. If we can convince them that we're quite nice, it might be nice to get them typing a bit more abstractly. Thank you very much. Did anybody have questions about weird fandom stuff or communities or, yeah? Is that a, yeah?
It's a question. What do you do when a particular fandom or community has taken over everything? To be more specific, PSR2 coding standards are very popular with a lot of people. And if you put any open source PHP code online, within about 20 minutes you get a pull request saying, let's make it PSR2 standard compliant. How do you deal with those people without resorting to 4-letter words?
You're not going to like this at all.
Accept they're right.
Don't make me go back to that Stephen Universe line. It's difficult because as committed as you are to your vision of what the project and community is, they're at least as committed to that. So being able to talk, like I find that being able to listen to them and verbalize that you're listening and saying, hi, do you know what, I do hear that you're asking for this. I understand some of the reasons you may be asking for this. I've personally opted not to go for this because. Did you have any other feedback I could help you with? We're not really looking to do that right now. That's going to work like 6% of the time. Yeah, just managing things with as much empathy and tact as possible, and then just like muting that in your inbox once it goes. Yeah, like spend the time and emotional investment that you feel is appropriate to let people know that their opinion is heard and valued, but without setting yourself on fire to keep somebody warm. Sorry. Like, ignore people when they get weird. Seems like a mean answer, but... are there any other questions? Oh, cool. Sir.
Do you think it's reasonable to say that these people are the extremists, the noisy ones, and not the majority?
In fandoms or open source communities or both?
Both.
Yes and no. I think they tend to be the folks you tend to hear about the most in both of them tend to be that really, really core group of extremely dedicated people who are the most connected to the identity of the community. I think that if there are problems with that core identity that are left unchecked by more moderate members, it can really, really steer the entire direction of the community in the future. So whether or not communities, either in fandoms or in open source communities or technology communities, become toxic and become hostile and become insupportable, depends to a very, very large degree on how those core fans operate and to what degree the larger community checks or enables that.
I would disagree with
Okay.
I tend to find in communities the most knowledgeable people tend to be the most hospitable people as well.
Yeah, the folks that are the most visible are not always the folks that are the most skilled or helpful. No, I'll completely agree with that. I think it's easy to mistake volume for value. Yeah. Please.
There's a really, really good series on YouTube by some American guys who do a series called Extra Credits, and it's more about game development and that side of the industry. But they did an interesting video on game addiction, and it was talking about how you get addicted to these big online games because you invest time, you invest money in it. The more time, more money you invest into it, you have to then justify the fact that you spend time and money investing into it, and you then put the time, money, or you rate more highly the amount of time and money you invested into it, and it's this perpetual cycle. And I just, throughout this entire talk, I've just been sat here thinking, we spend our entire time working with tabs or spaces, and we spend our entire lives changing bits that other people have done and conforming to certain rules that we've got, or watching some silly cartoon. And it's almost like fighting an addiction to try and pull yourself away from that and take a more mature, higher level view. And
I think it's like...
Do you see what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah.
So I'm probably not explaining it right.
No, I totally get what you're getting at. Like we create a feedback loop where the more we put into it, the more we're connected to it. And that feels really natural. Like we're building our own participation in communities while building the communities. if I'm paraphrasing you right.
Yeah.
But that as we build, we invest more and more of our own value and our own identity within these structures. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, when you say ego, it often sounds like a criticism. But when we invest ourselves in a community and project, we are investing our ego not necessarily in a negative way. Like, we care so much about this thing we care about that other people, whether from in or outside the community, challenging small aspects of that feels very much like a personal attack. So I am still like, what, no spaces? But it's completely stupid not using spaces, that's completely fine. But the fact that the fact that I have that kind of an emotional reaction just based on my own workflow is insane and irrational. I think continually having to check with yourself to be like, is this a reasonable thing to all caps about? Is a hard, cool thing to do.
More a comment than a question. Around the tabs versus spaces. I'm sorry. I feel strongly towards the spaces thing because it's.
Here we go.
Because it's more commonplace. But I can look at it abstractly and actually see that tabs makes more sense. But I care more about consistency than I do about the actual fact that it's tabs or spaces. I mean, tabs is actually superior in terms of technical reasoning because it's a single character that denotes a piece of like the indentation itself, and then like the display values of it can be changed depending on your preferences. Whereas with spaces, you don't get that. But I use spaces, and I feel strongly about people using spaces because it seems to be convention.
I was just thinking that it must be very satisfying to get to like thump, thump, thump the space bar multiple times. So I'm going to try spaces for a week. Let's.
You
No.
just have to bring spaces.
It just creates spaces for you.
Oh, please.
I was just going to say that like the answer to this sometimes is just use soft tabs, which is the best and you get 4 spaces and everybody's happy. So
I am totally going to change that slide to tabs v spaces. Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, for me, the most important thing there that you said for me was, it's almost like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's understanding your ideological opponent, that they have an emotional investment in it as well. And I strongly disagree on running a community based on emotion, but it's part of the picture. Like, it's part of relating to someone is understanding that a lot of people are very invested in what they do. Like, it used to really hurt me when people criticised my code, for example. But that code's not me, but I'm 35 now and I'm mature enough to know that. Someone who's 21 doesn't. So it's like, even if someone's doing something you're completely opposed to, it's still a case of treating them with respect.
I think in technology as well, the idea, we often hold an idea that it's a pure meritocracy and we are operating in spaces without emotion or ego. And I think that's really, really potentially damaging. I think saying this space is just about the code, it's just ignores the fact that it's humans interacting with humans around a project. I think that it sounds very fluffy and it sounds very strange to say taking into account human emotions and human relationships in a project makes the project work better in real time. But I like to think it's quite valuable.
I think it is. And I think it's about being mature and adult. I mean, we'll discuss this separately, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
I think you and I are going to differ a lot on how we think that should be done. But I do think that it's an important part of the picture.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the best way to do it is.
I've found spending a third of my professional life going, just stop. It's not super effective.
I used to run humanbeatbox.com. And that used to be,
awesome.
Yeah, I used to run a fandom basically, and the beatboxers were mostly like 15-year-old poor kids. So it's like I know all about people contributing to a website, but being very emotionally hurt and the drama that comes along with it. It's quite hard. It's hard work.
Yeah.
You feel like their dad.
Aww.
You know? So it's pretty difficult.
Oh, please.
I think like kind of one of the thoughts I had while watching your talk, which was brilliant, was that it's kind of, we see fandoms and we see open source communities, and like the third entity that I saw was companies, and the companies that I've seen, some companies I've worked for have a strongly defined culture, and then like my company right now that I work with recruits for culture first and foremost, and then for technical skills, just to make work better, because my like other companies I worked for, culture was kind of just nobody cared about it. Like nobody even, because companies mostly recruit for technical skills, not culture, and then you get cases where rather than actually working towards something great, you just spend your day arguing about tabs or spaces or Vim or Emacs or whatever. So I think that actually quite defines like how likely the company or the team is likely to succeed if you got like-minded people. No matter like, you know, they might prefer something you don't prefer, but if they all stick to it and they're all happy with it, I think that they're a lot more effective than like companies that just are a bunch of weird preferences and like, you know, people spending their days arguing about whether you should have braces on the same line or on a separate line.
I recently saw a really good talk by Matt sorry, Matt, on empathy in development patterns. It was really, really nice, and just the whole before the technical skills, before most anything, it's being able to see the other person's point of view.
Yeah.
I think that's massively underrated.
Yeah, I think like one of the values in my companies is being no ego doer. So you basically, and you like another very, very important value is you always let the other person save face, even though they might be wrong, which is very, very key.
That's super rare. Like, I love technology, but we're often just like, excuse me, I think you'll find that you're wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else? Oh, please.
You said that you've spent a lot of time just going, oh no, and trying to not get people to argue. Is there any kind of point in just finding a common enemy for these people? So just pointing out that it doesn't matter whether you use tabs or spaces as long as you don't type it on a Windows machine.
So, versus
what kind of monster?
My enemy is my friend.
I'm sort of a holistic, fuzzy bunny of tech. So just be like, guys, stop fighting over there instead. Seems unlikely to solve larger issues.
I'm not sure what the common enemy of the people who are worried about Bigfoot would be, but surely Sherlock and elementary
there's a lot
fans
of weird
must all
stuff
hate
about like
something.
them and the Loch Ness people.
Oh, okay. Maybe as long as they all hate the Loch Ness people, that's
Yeah, or they're like, all right, we all agree that the Fiji mermaid is nonsense.
Made that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry.
Can I say just one last thing? I think there is a major difference between the fandoms and the community of open source.
Okay.
Is that open source stuff is something that is built and must work, while the fandoms are more about fruition of stuff. So I think that an open source community has a level of dignity that is a bit superior than a fandom in terms of we produce stuff.
They make cool, weird stuff. They make
Yeah, like
insane, exciting, often troubling things. Like the value we hold in the beautiful, useful things we make, I don't think differs in its essence from the value that members of this community or that community hold in the beautiful, cool, weird things they make. I think that we are very, very married to the technology, so we see this incredible value in this technology. But it might be a matter of perspective.
it's also the perspective that with open source you create power, money, it is used professionally, while fandom are a bit more free in the sense that no one is really living out of them.
There are tons of people make their money. Like the Bigfoot industry, that's an industry.
Yeah.
All of the cons have artists attached to it. They've got cosplay artists. Like,
it's a niche industry, it's smaller, there's a problem of scale.
I don't want to...
There are decisions that you take on an open source project that could cause millions of pounds of consequence, while in fandoms there's no this pressure, it's just psychological pressure.
I think that the money... Well, I think that's getting into a criticism of capitalism.
No, go on, man. Don't worry.
I think that the differences in the communities and the way that we value them is a matter of perspective and abstraction. So for us, it's very, very difficult to see how a massive open source project and a massive open source community could be looked at in the same terms as the Steven Universe fandoms. Very, very important. But the things that we get out of our open source communities, I think you're seeing other people get out of cryptozoology communities or fandom communities or I was about to say religious communities. I'm not sure I'm willing to go that. I'm pretty much willing to go that far. Like the idea of having a community, having people who share things that you value, and agreeing on social rules and mores and enforcing them in prescriptive patterns. For me, it feels, it's very fluffy, but feels very much like the same process and same animal. I think we might have to disagree.
No. There are many things that are in common. I'm not saying that this thing doesn't make sense. They make sense. We have much in common, and much of the pressure that seems to come out of nowhere is there. I don't deny it. I just say that there is also something that is different because usually people doesn't live out of what comes out from their fandom, while when you're a contributor of an open source project, that you make money out of it.
It depends. Like if you look at larger fandoms like the Star Wars fandom, so many people make their living off of a Star Wars fandom. I've never seen the movies. Don't properly access how or why myself on an emotional level, but people make their living out of this. It's just a slightly less fancy living a lot of the time. Sorry, I might cut you guys off and chat to you at the bar. Thank you very much for being so patient.